So the main characters of the play The Crucible are Abigail Williams, a young girl who was caught drinking chicken blood and engaging in witchcraft, John and Elizabeth Proctor, a farmer and his wife who are well known in the town. John is someone that has had an affair with Abigail and fears ridicule if he dares come out, but ends up coming out because he views honesty and integrity as very important. Reverend Paris, a power hungry and leader like figure in the town. Judge Danforth, a delusional man who believes that the witch trials are beneficial. Francis and Rebecca Nurse, a wealthy couple highly regarded by the town, with the exception of the Putnams. Thomas and Ann Putnam, another wealthy couple that exploit the hysteria by accusing others of witchcraft and taking their land. Giles and Martha Corey, an elderly farmer and his wife, as well as many others, including Reverend John Hale, Mary Warren, Betty Paris, and so on. The plot of The Crucible takes place in 1692 in Salem, Massachusetts. The Reverend of the town, Reverend Paris, catches Abigail, his niece, Betty, his daughter, as well as many other girls dancing in the woods engaging in witchcraft. The girls are confronted about their actions and deny any wrongdoing related to witchcraft. Soon after, a past affair between Abigail and John Proctor is revealed, and Abigail still wants Proctor, but the feelings are not mutual. Soon after, many men of the town begin arguing over wealth and the circumstances at hand, and shortly thereafter, Reverend Hale interrogates the girls after he arrives at the town. They panic and begin accusing seemingly random townsfolk of consorting with the devil. A long and dreadful spring of backstabbing and lying ensues, and the trials cause many innocent people to be killed and many others to become uneasy in their own homes. Abigail runs off with Reverend Paris's money near the end of the play, and in the end, John Proctor puts an end to the trials, sacrificing his life to prevent them from continuing. So some themes in this play are paranoia, distrust, dishonesty, courage, collusion, delusion, injustice, and cowardice in many different forms. Abigail is a character that represents dishonesty, cowardice, and collusion. She lives for her own benefit, putting her and her friends before the general public. She lies, scams, and retreats when she is confronted, and Reverend Paris and Danforth represent paranoia and delusion. Paris and Danforth literally hunt people based on the words of those who are clearly liars and cheaters, and they also believe that they are doing good for the town at first, despite clear evidence otherwise. Lastly, Proctor represents courage. He starts to play as a liar and a cheater in the past, but he realizes, well, not necessarily realizes, but displays that honesty is the most important thing to him, and near the end of the play is a martyr and a town hero. The historical context of this play is that it is based on the real event that was the Salem witch trials of 1692. The characters, although based on real people, were altered at least slightly for the sake of the play, and the likeliest reason is that the play itself was also based on the 1950s Red Scare, McCarthyism. This was a historical campaign against alleged communists in the United States. The witch trials and McCarthyism share striking resemblances, mainly in that they are predicated on baseless and harmful accusations against others. So Arthur Miller is the famous American playwright known for writing this play, as well as All of My Sons, Death of a Salesman, Broken Glass, The Price, and possibly others. These are his most popular plays and the six that he was credited for writing. After a court testimony by Elia Kazan, a famous director, Miller ended his friendship with Kazan, and because his testimony was influenced by the McCarthyism hysteria. In his testimony, Kazan said that many members of the group theater um, were involved with the Communist Party at the time. It's likely that this play was influenced by Kazan's testimony. Arthur Miller is recognized overall as one of the greatest playwrights of all time, and he passed away in 2005 at the age of 90. So this play was written to discourage the idea of witch hunting and mass hysteria, and it should not be possible to end somebody's career or life, for that matter, with baseless and often irrational claims. This can create fear, and as displayed in not only this play but also in the real witch trials, um, it can single-handedly put an end to a community. In situations that instill fear in the public, claims and trials should still be looked at rationally and handled carefully to avoid catastrophic mistakes. This message is important and should be remembered by all, especially those in power. So, in my version of the play, I took on the role of the director, and I wanted to look at first the set design, as well as later on the characters, costumes, lighting, and audio that best fit how I would imagine this play or how I would have set up a performance of this play. So first, for set design, this piece is based off of the Salem witch trials, as I mentioned. So I would design the set as a small town, obviously Salem, Massachusetts, mainly with farms, banks, and decent-looking houses to show that this community is thriving. I would make sure to design the houses as 1 or 2 story wooden or brick buildings, likely with livestock and old-style wooden furniture to establish the time period and that it's well off. Throughout the performance, I would slowly change certain aspects of the scenery, such as depicting the houses as more run down and the city as more barren. I would also make sure to include a court and church, as well as forest settings, because those are settings that appear in the play. Lastly, as the hysteria increases, I would subtly have more and more red objects, potentially in the background, on the characters' costumes, appear to represent the Red Scare McCarthyism that this play is written about. So when it comes to costume design, I would want the costumes to have sort of an Amish look to them, because I think that would kind of represent how they were supposed to look. At the beginning, I would want the characters to have bonnets and nice dresses, as well as farmers' hats and vests and dress pants for the men. For the reverend, I would want a turtleneck robe similar to something that a priest of the time would wear. Lastly, I would have the judge dressed in a suit or fancy robe to show power and importance. Throughout the performance, I would have the clothes of most characters become dirty and tattered to depict the state of disarray that the town is in. So for the lighting and audio, in my version of this play, the lighting and audio would be extremely important but subtle. I would want to focus on the feeling of mayhem taking over the town. So my main focus at first would be to set the lighting up as a sunny day or basically a calm lighting, and the audio would focus on one speaker at a time and sort of a normal interaction at first. But as the play develops, I want the lighting to become more eerie and the forest scenes, sort of ugly eyesore colors during the trials to make the audience feel rather uncomfortable, and a shade of deep red during the actual hangings. And this would represent not only like the color of blood and catastrophe, but also represent the color of communism, referencing once again the Red Scare. Lastly, I would design the audio to be hectic and loud, increasingly chaotic through the performance, and this would make the audience truly enveloped in the madness of the town. So for my version, Abigail Williams was the first character I wanted to focus on, and one of the most notable characters. I want her to seem like a normal young girl at first, simply looking for a thrill with her friends in the woods, but this demeanor would quickly change, though into a sort of sinister and dubious liar and thief. Her character should be cunning and deviant. I would want the audience to slowly fade from feeling remorse for her to kind of honestly hoping that she was hanged and the trials were ended. And she would use blackmail, thievery, and coercion to get what she wanted. And this manipulative and snide character should be hated by the audience by the end of the play. So in my version, Elizabeth and John Proctor would be the protagonists once again, and they were the quintessential Christian farm family of the time. John is a stern man who puts honesty and integrity at the forefront of his ideals, and I want John Proctor to be a character that the audience falls in love with. However, he isn't perfect, and that should be displayed during the play. He notably had an affair with Abigail, though I want John to seem human and remorseful for his past mistakes. Throughout the play, I want him to be entirely honest and admit to his mistakes. This character will ultimately reveal to be the altruistic martyr that saves the town, um, sacrificing his own life for others. And his wife, Elizabeth, would also prove to be a loving Christian woman, forgiving John and sticking by his side even though he has made mistakes in the past. Reverend Paris would be a paranoid man with disdain for others. He puts himself before others and demonstrates a little mercy. In my version of the play, he would appear harsh and egotistical. He focuses entirely on the wrong issues, worrying more about his reputation than the lives of others. In my version, however, I would depict Reverend Paris as a slightly more human character, and I might base his concerns more on fear than selfishness in some scenarios. I feel as though Paris should be depicted as a sort of gray area character rather than a completely negative one. Reverend Hale is initially a paranoid pastor who justifies his actions because he believes that they're fair and reasonable. Uh, Throughout Arthur Miller's version of the play, Hale realizes the severity of the accusations and begins trying to save townsfolk's lives by telling them to admit to witchcraft to save their own lives and accuse others instead. But in my version of the play, Hale would make this drastic character change the same way that he does in the real play. But due to the lack of success of his warnings and the damage that he realizes that he has inadvertently caused, I would want him to either be executed or commit suicide as a way of sort of illustrating just how out of control the trials have gotten, that people who are clearly innocent, as they weren't even there when the trial started, are not even safe. Judge Danforth is an intellectual man who comes to Salem to judge the trials, but is completely ignorant to the fact that the trials are obviously a waste of time, despite major evidence that it is. I think Danforth should represent ignorance and denial in the face of evidence, and in my version, Danforth would enforce his beliefs despite what the people of the town say. I want Danforth to appear as a fearful and stubborn man who sticks to his gut no matter, well, really what. This character does not change much throughout the story in either my version of the play or Arthur Miller's version. And I believe that represents how hard it is to change one's beliefs, like once they are really stuck with them. So lastly, the remaining supporting characters, the townsfolk, represent mob mentality in my version of the play and how group hysteria can cause situations to get out of hand really, really quickly. Characters such as Giles Corey, Thomas Putnam, and Francis Nurse represent some of the hot-tempered townsfolk who might inadvertently or intentionally cause the trials to continue out of fear and anger. And in my version, these characters would not be remorseful of others necessarily until they were on trial. At this point, supporting characters realize the intensity of the situations that they've put others in, but it's too late. And these characters demonstrate how one's morals can change with the collective morals. So overall, the message of my play would be similar to the message in Miller's version. And that message is to think rationally even in a group setting. Always put yourself in other people's shoes before you judge them or make accusations about them. It's always important to imagine someone else's life as if it were you in that situation, because as the real life Salem trials show and as the Crucible shows, you might eventually be in